You like my Halloween decor? I stole it from the local pizzeria. Now, you might say that's morally wrong and also actually a crime, but in my defense, I don't think the single underpaid security guy that was there really cared. So, as a person who probably spends too much time on YouTube, you're probably at least vaguely aware that last year, after almost a decade of development hell, the FNAF movie was finally released. I remember watching the trailer for it and immediately deciding that it was probably going to be absolutely terrible. The reason? This. This is the reason. Tell me, what's the last good Blumhouse movie you watched? And don't say Mafregan. So, because I assumed it was gonna be terrible, and because everyone kept making videos about how it was terrible, I didn't watch it. So you might be asking, why'd I change my mind? Greed, mostly, but also because somewhere deep down, FNAF still holds a special little spot in my cancerous, rotting heart. Now, it's been exactly a year since the movie came out, assuming that this video releases on time, which I mean, of course it will. What do I look like, an idiot? Anyways, that means that I can tell this video some dumb shit like the FNAF movie, 1 year later, a retrospective. But so, was it actually any good? Well, let's find out. Well, you're gonna find out. I already know because I already made this whole video. The movie opens with knockoff Jake Gyllenhaal experiencing workplace harassment from his colleagues. Said colleagues also just so happen to be 10-ton murder robots that are trying very hard to get into his office. The guard manages to crawl into the vents and makes it into the back rooms. But the exit's blocked and Foxy's singing a little tune about how utterly f***ed he is. So he's strapped to a chair and has his face turned into jelly by the Afton Robotics patented Freddy Fazbear themed Face Shredder 9000. Then we get some cool opening credits and then we're introduced to our actual main character. Who else but Mike Schmidt? Although I don't think he's supposed to be Michael in this movie. He's played by Josh Hutcherson, who you probably know for playing Peter Malark in Hunger Games. But you might also know him for playing Peter Malark in Hunger Games. And this one's a little obscure, but you might also know him for playing Peter Malark in Hunger Games. He's broke and also taking care of his sister, Abby, because their parents are dead. He can barely keep a job down because he keeps randomly beating people up. That's only half a joke. His aunt is also trying to take custody of Abby, and on top of all that, every night he forces himself to remember the day that his brother was kidnapped to try and find any clues in his memory of who took him. So yeah, overall his life's pretty shitty, and also relatable. He goes to a job counselor, which I didn't know was a thing, but I guess that's a thing. And he tells Mike that he's not got a lot of options, but he's got one possible offer. If you like and subscribe, I'll pay you for it. You got any other options? What, you think you're too good for that? Yes. Alright, well, I got a job at the abandoned pizzeria at the edge of town, if you want that instead. But Mike doesn't want that job either, because he's too busy having improv therapy sessions at night. But the aunt threatens to take him to court, because she's evil and wants that juicy government check. So he decides that a job is better than no job. So Mike goes to the restaurant and checks the place out, and I really gotta give the movie credit. The restaurant looks great. The set design all looks really good. It looks exactly how I always imagined the pizzeria would look IRL. Whoever the set designer was, I hope they were paid very well, because there's so many details everywhere, and it looks convincingly abandoned, while also still looking recognizable. And that's not even getting into all the little Easter eggs they added in. Oh, but we'll get to those. Anyways, Mike watches the employee training tape. The tape obviously gets spooky when it gets to the animatronics, which is just so f***ing cliche. I'm pretty sure half the Unlock horror videos I've watched also have done the exact same thing. Then he gets ready to perform his nightly trauma ritual, but this time something's different. There's 5 other kids now. The ghost kids run away. Mike chases one of them, but he trips right back into reality, precisely at 6 AM of course. He locks the place up, goes back home, and pays the babysitter in Robux. But it turns out the babysitter's actually spying on him for the aunt.
We are not eating. You do realize that lunch is the most important meal of the day.
Man, MatPat's retirement didn't work out too well, I guess. The babysitter didn't find anything incriminating in Mike's house, so the aunt refuses to pay her.
Unless either one of you has a brilliant idea, which I realize is highly unlikely.
Man, I gotta give it to him. I think this is the most accurate depiction of a Karen I've ever seen in any movie ever. The babysitter's brother suggests just killing Mike in this busy diner, while the aunt's lawyer is also there. But the aunt has just enough brain cells to realize that that's probably a really dumb idea. The babysitter brings up that he needs his new job, and the brother suggests just breaking in to get him fired. That night, Mike goes back to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeronio and has another dream with the ghost kids. He chases one of them, but the kid slashes him with his little cardboard hook, and then we get Spooky Kid with black eyes. You can just add that to the cliche counter. He wakes up and everything's going crazy, so he turns off the breaker, but this night's only getting worse, cuz there's a cop at the door. And you ever just see a character and go, oh yeah, you're gonna be the bad guy? Because that's exactly what I had when Vanessa showed up. Especially when she then proceeded to be weird as hell for the next 5 minutes. Well, and also because, you know, Vanessa, Vanny, She bandages up Mike's arm, cause when he got slashed in the dream, he also got slashed IRL. Cliche counter, can you come back please? Thank you. She also seems pretty familiar with the place, as she shows the animatronics to Mike. She also reveals that back in the 80s, some kids went missing at Freddy's. So after that random encounter, Mike goes home, but the babysitter's brother's been waiting and now it's time to go in and f shit up. But unfortunately for them, the only thing that's gonna get f***ed up is them. You like that? You like that little... you like that? This is the part where the movie finally remembers that it's supposed to actually be a horror movie. So the boys get to work, but then this guy starts hearing spooky noises from the fridge. He opens the fridge, and there's an evil cupcake in there. But then he hears a spooky noise behind him, turns around, nothing's there, and when he turns back, oh shit, the cupcake's gone. And then he turns around again, and he gets attacked by questionable CGI. So here's the thing, this isn't scary. In my opinion. Mostly because you can predict everything that's gonna happen. There's no tension. If you ever watched a single horror movie in your entire life, then you know exactly what's gonna happen. I can't be scared if I can predict every single thing that's gonna happen. If you didn't know exactly where this scene was gonna go when it started, you should probably watch more horror movies. Now, you can argue that knowing that something is coming can enhance the horror, and that's true, but not if I know exactly what's gonna happen. I mean, even in the original games, which I don't really think are that scary to begin with. But even there, you didn't know when something was gonna happen. You just knew that something was gonna happen. Now, it's not entirely fair to compare the movie to the game, because, well, games will always be scarier than movies, for the simple reason that with a horror movie, you're watching scary shit happen to someone else, while in a game, the scary shit's happening to you. But the movie still could have done a lot more to actually, you know, scare you. Now, the other problem is that these designs just aren't scary. In my opinion. I know that people always say that the FNAF 1 designs are super scary and uncanny, but I have just never really gotten that. Sure, they're a little uncanny, but they're really just not that creepy to me. But FNAF 1 at least knew how to pose them. Here they're just kinda there. Like this is kinda creepy, and this just kinda looks goofy. And doesn't help that everything's also just way too bright. And lastly, they just kinda look like dudes in suits, mostly because, you know, they are. They really don't move that much like, well, an animatronic would. They just move like, you know, people. But I don't really know how you'd fix that without turning them into CGI monstrosities, which would absolutely be worse, because the practical effects are really, really good. And I do really like that they went the practical route with the animatronics. Yeah, it does kind of end up making them look a little too much like they're just dudes in suits, but overall they look great. I mean, you can even see the seam lines and stuff. They did a really good job of translating the FNAF 1 designs into live action without making them look that goofy. And while I don't really think that they're that scary, the movie does, I think, do a decent job of at least making them intimidating when they have to be. The one thing though that I don't like is the way their eyes light up red whenever they get angry, which just is nowhere near as creepy as the just empty eye sockets with the little white dot in them from the games. But that's a pretty minor complaint. Anyways, the babysitter's brother ends up locking himself in the office after he sees his buddy get murdered. But while the 10-ton murder drones apparently can't break open the pissy little lock, they can just send the cupcake through the vents to stage a hit on him.
Raiden, have you heard of the hit game Among Us?
But eventually the cupcake off, and I guess he didn't lock the door because it just opens on its own. So, like an idiot, he goes back out there, the door closes, and then he gets a hook up his ass. The babysitter goes in there to see what the hell is taking so long, follows a definitely not ghost, whose lines are very obviously dubbed in post, and she follows him into the back room and, hey, neat. Anyways, she gets chomped in half.
Was that the bite of 87?
The next morning, Vanessa shows up at Mike's house to get mad at him for letting the pizzeria get robbed, which doesn't really make sense because there's no way that she thinks that they broke in while he was still in the restaurant. She brings up the sleeping pills that he left there, but they clearly hadn't broken in when he was passed the out because the place wasn't trashed when she showed up, and presumably she stayed there until the morning, so they obviously didn't break in after she showed up. So the only time they could have broken in was after Mike left, which he wouldn't be responsible for because he's only there at night. Anyways, Mike explains the thing about the trauma dreams and Vanessa feels bad for him, so she lets him off the hook. That night, he tries calling the babysitter, but she's not picking up because she's, you know, dead. So instead, he takes Abby with him to the restaurant, which originally when I saw that in the trailer, I thought it was really dumb, but honestly, it's not that bad. So Mike goes to sleep and has another ghost encounter, while Abby wakes up and decides to be big dumb stupid and go out of the office. Mike wakes up, sees that she's gone, and hears her screaming, so he runs into the main room and sees the animatronics surrounding her. The animatronics immediately go into murder mode, but it turns out they weren't turning her insides into outsides, they were just playing with her.
You want to explain yourself?
Abby tells Freddy Ferdinand Frederino Fazbear to not violently murder her brother, and he likes her, so he decides that Mike can keep his face. So they go home, and Mike realizes that Abby's been drawing the ghost kids he's been seeing in his dreams. So then he realizes, oh shit, maybe I can figure out who murdered my little bro by getting Abby to ask them who did it. So next night, he goes back to Freddy Fazbender's pepperonery. Vanessa's there, and Mike realizes that she already knew that the animatronics are alive. And I kinda like that Mike just casually accepts that the animatronics are haunted and that ghosts are real. It's actually kinda refreshing to have a character who's just like, right? Guess this is a thing now. At this point, the animatronics stop being scary entirely. It almost turns into like a sitcom. Which, you know, doesn't really work when I'm supposed to be scared of these things. But for some reason that I genuinely can't figure out why, I kinda like this direction. Like, yeah, it ruins the horror and doesn't really fit with the tone of the rest of the movie, but I like it. I don't know what to tell you. So, Abby comes up with the idea to make a big tent so they can sleep with the animatronics. No, not that way, you f***ing sick f***. Nobody was thinking that. So they set everything up, but then Abby tries striking a chord on Bonnie's guitar and instead gets f***ing electrocuted. So that puts an end to the party. Vanessa tells Mike to never bring Abby back to the restaurant or else she'll
shoot you.
Damn! Okay. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Also, I would complain about how Mike doesn't take Abby to the hospital, but honestly, considering how American healthcare is, you know what? It makes sense. So they go home and Mike realizes that he kinda sucks at this whole parenting thing. So next morning, he calls up the aunt to babysit Abby while he's off to work, you know, to try and figure out who killed his brother. Abby doesn't like this, so she locks herself in her room and scribbles out Mike's face in all her drawings, which is absolutely future school behavior. But anyways, so Mike goes back to Fredbear's school for brain surgery, falls asleep to relive his trauma again. This is is like the 4th time this has happened in the movie, by the way. Instead, though, this time he sees an alternate scenario where his brother wasn't taken. The ghosts show up again, but this time they've got an offer. If he gives them Abby, then they'll give him this dream every night. Mike at first agrees, but then he realizes that that's pretty dumb and also terrible, and he tries to take it back. And I gotta give Josh Hutcherson credit. He does a pretty good job in this scene. He really sells that Mike's so overcome with emotion that he's just not at all thinking about the fact that he's basically agreeing to sacrificing his sister. But while he's still dreaming, Foxy shows up and takes him to the Afton Robotics patented Freddy Fazbear themed Face Shredder 9000. He conveniently wakes up right before his face gets mangled, manages to get out of the chair, and discovers all the dead people in the back room. Now, a couple things. First off, this thing is dumb. Second, why didn't Foxy just murder him? It's not like they can't murder people themselves because we see them kill people themselves. So why the didn't Foxy just kill him? The answer is pretty simple, because then the movie would end here. So instead, they put him in the face shredder so he can escape and the movie can continue. It is, yeah, it's very stupid. So Mike runs out of the place while Fox is chasing him. Meanwhile, back home, Golden Freddy shows up, kills the aunt, and convinces Abby to go with him back to Freddy Fredington's tea house. They take the taxi, and the driver, who's also Corey Kenshin, because I guess while he's not making videos, he makes his money this way, doesn't really care that there's a 10-ton murder machine in the back of his car. So he drives them to the pizzeria. Back with Mike, Vanessa's picked him up and brought him to a police supply station. Mike gets a little pissed at Vanessa for not telling him about how, murderous the animatronics are, and he asks her what they want with his sister. So Vanessa tells him that they want to stuff her into a suit, and then she goes into backstory mode again, because that's like half her dialogue in the entire movie. So basically, some guy murdered some toddlers and then stuffed them into the one place the police wouldn't look, aka the animatronics. Which is dumb, because there's no way nobody would notice the horrific stench of carcasses in the suits. And yes, I know, that's a plot point taken directly from the games, but it's still dumb there, and it's even dumber here. She also reveals that the animatronics can't remember being killed, cause William controls them, somehow. Mike obviously wants to know who the killer is, to which Vanessa responds,
I tried to warn you. I really did try, in my own way.
yeah, it's just a pretty shit way. So Vanessa reveals that the murderer is good old Willie A, because there's no other villain in this franchise. And also that...
He's my father.
Oh, for fuck's sake, they actually did it?
Very cruel man.
Also, he was my
Very
dad.
clever man.
They actually did the... They actually did the he's my father thing? I was joking earlier! What the f- Yep, that's right. They actually made her William's daughter. And you know what? It's still better than Vanny in the games. So she gives him a taser and a cattle prod, though she won't help him herself, cause, daddy issues. He crawls in through the vents. Don't you f***ing dare. He tosses some water on the stage and electrocutes Bono and Fredo, and then he tases Chica before she can animatronicify Abby. We get a cute little moment between Mike and Abby where Mike tells her, I'll never leave you again. And then they try to get the f*** out of there. But the cupcake chomps on his leg, so he tells Abby to run, which she does. But Foxy wakes up, because Mike didn't deal with him yet. This is a cool shot, by the way. Mike manages to shake the cupcake off and grabs the cattle prod, and the cupcake f***ing flies, then dies. Meanwhile, back with Abby. She's hiding from Foxy in the arcade, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be a reference to the Silver Eyes. Foxy looks behind the cabinet, but she's somehow crawled into the ball pit. I have no idea how, considering there's absolutely no way she crawled all the way over there without Foxy noticing. But sure, we'll just let it slide. Mike makes it back to the main room, but oh shit, someone else has arrived at the party.
I always come back.
Mike tries to tase William, but he just f***ing tanks that shit. I don't know how, because last I checked, humans are very much still affected by electricity. So they start the fight, by which I mean that William bodies Mike because he's got a 30-year career of killing kids on his resume, while Mike seemingly hasn't worked out a day in his life and has a diet consisting exclusively of cereal and tap water. American tap water. Meanwhile, back with Abby, Foxy's about to find her and presumably murder her, but then he gets tased by Vanessa because she's got a character arc to complete. Back with Mike, William starts doing some classic, villain gloating, and then roundhouse kicks Mike in the face. Then he wakes up the animatronics so they can do the murdering for him. But then Vanessa shows up and shoots him, and he's fine somehow, because I guess his f***ing suit's bulletproof. Obviously it's the metal plating under the suit that stopped the bullet. That would have to be some pretty thick steel then, which would in turn massively slow him down. Also, the impact would still probably break a rib or two. Also, why didn't Vanessa just... So Mike... hold on. So Mike realizes that William's controlling the animatronics with the drawings on the wall. So he tells Abby to make a drawing of the kids getting murdered by William to remind them of how they were brutally murdered by William. William tries to stop her, but Vanessa stops him, so he stabs her. Okay. At least they didn't make William a pussy. So the animatronics remember how they were brutally murdered by William, and the cupcake attacks William, biting a chunk out of the suit, which proves that either there's no metal plating, or the metal plating is thin enough that this little bastard can take a chunk out. This then causes the spring locks to activate, and William f***ing dies. Wait though, shouldn't realistically him getting shot have been enough to activate the spring locks? But anyways, Mike and Abby get out of there, and then we cut to a couple weeks later. Mike is doing fine, Abby's doing way better, Vanessa's in the hospital in a coma, but she is still alive, and everyone's happy. And I guess nobody asked why the aunt's corpse was just lying in his house. Like, it's just not addressed that the aunt got killed in his house. Hell, he would have also had some motive to kill her, because she's trying to take custody of Abby, so like, wouldn't there be an investigation? Wouldn't there be suspicion on him? And no, didn't see Golden Freddy hiding the body. You can't say that Golden Freddy hit the body because that's not shown at all. Unless you want to say that the aunt was just knocked out, I guess? But that's not what the movie implies, so... You can say, well, there was no blood, but like, this is a PG-13 movie. Of course there's no blood. We're just gonna, I guess, sweep the literal corpse in the room under the rug. Also, William's still Springtrapifying in the kitchen. Okay, so you might have noticed that William kinda sucks as a villain. First off, why does he murder toddlers? The movie never explains it, and I don't know what the current consensus is on his motives in the games. Last I checked, which was about 3 years ago, it was for immortality, I think, but the movie doesn't mention anything like that. The movie doesn't address his motives at all. It doesn't even hint at why William likes murdering toddlers. And you can't just say, but the game. No. The movie stands on its own. The movie has to answer that question on its own. Now, to be fair, I guess he doesn't necessarily need a good reason for turning kids into milk cartons. He can just be evil for the sake of being evil, which, that's fine. That works for plenty of villains. But he's also just not really interesting, at least in the movie. He's barely in there, then he shows up, kicks Mike a little, and then dies. He's not really built up well. Yeah, he pretends to be a job counselor, but then he disappears from the movie until the end. And actually, why did he want Mike to take the job? He apparently doesn't want Mike to find out about him. And while he's telling Vanessa that she sucks at her job, he makes it sound like he didn't plan to kill Mike as long as he didn't find out. And if he did plan to kill Mike all along, then why didn't he just murder him the first night there? And you know what? It's even worse because they could have just taken William from the books and changed some stuff to fit him into the movie. Because William in the Silver Eyes is way creepier than the unhinged furry in the movie. Silver Eyes William is actually creepy. I mean, the book even does the whole villain hiding in plain sight thing way better because William pretends to be a security guy called Dave, and that works way better because he's actually, a lot more present in the book. He's not just this minor side character that you forget about for the entire movie. Now, it's not like the books are perfect. They aren't. William in the Twisted Ones was goofy, but at least he felt kind of intimidating in the books. Whereas here, he just kind of feels like a dumbass in a fursuit. Like, the movie wants us to think William's really smart and has carefully planned everything out. But, like, he hasn't, and he isn't. He's a dumbass. Nothing in the movie makes him seem smart at all. But aside from William being a shitty villain, the other big problem is that if you know literally anything about FNAF, then you know exactly what's gonna happen. And if you don't know anything about FNAF, then you still know exactly what's gonna happen. The movie's just really predictable. Vanessa shows up and immediately you know that she somehow is involved in the murders. You immediately know that William killed Mike's brother because of course he did. You can basically guess the entire plot pretty quickly. Hell, you can even guess what the scares are gonna be. You don't need to know anything about FNAF to know exactly what's gonna happen in the movie. And speaking of the horror, the movie's not scary. Like, I already went over it in detail, but there's no atmosphere, there's no tension, all the scares are insanely predictable. It's just not really scary. So with all that said, final conclusion, this movie is just very mid.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed.
I like this movie. I know I've spent basically the entire video talking about how mid it is, but despite all the problems with it, I honestly like it a lot, and I think that's for one reason. This feels like a movie made for the fans. It feels like the people that worked on it actually gave a f***. I mean, if you're not a fan, MatPat showing up, or Corey Kenshin showing up, or the Sparky cameo, it's not gonna mean anything to you. It's not gonna matter to you, but it matters to the fans, you know, it matters to the people who actually give a f*** about FNAF. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still a flawed movie. Just because there's a lot of references and a lot of fan service does not change that it is still a very flawed movie with quite a bit of dumb shit in it. And if you don't care about FNAF, then it's probably not gonna be as good, because, well, you're not gonna give a f*** about all the references. But if you wanna, you know, turn your brain off for 2 hours and just have fun, then it's good for that. But if you want something more than that, then you probably won't find it. But despite that, I can't bring myself to hate it. Despite all the problems I have with it, I can't bring myself to even really dislike it at all. I like the movie despite its issues. You're just biased. Yeah, no shit. Also, how are you still alive? I shot you, like, twice. I actually don't know. Anyways, overall, the movie's not bad, I think. It's got a lot of problems, but it's not terrible either. Even if you don't give a FNAF, you can have fun with this movie at least. It's just a little fun movie that clearly had a lot of care put into it, despite the plot being kinda dumb. So, happy late Halloween. Here's some candy. Now get the f*** out. I've got a body to clean up. Assuming he's actually dead this time.